friends told you
Well,
about working in the factories?
there was a lot of stuff going on. They just, well, I mean, they were sad that they lost their job, and they, they blamed the company, and they blamed these grievances that were piled up and never taken care of. And of course, they they knew that times were better at that company when it was sort of home owned, when it was Clinton Corn Processing Company, and then of course when it goes up into bigger corporations, they lose that contact, and I think that's what they kind of blame for why things happened the way they did. But I don't know any specific stories about what went on, different things. It wouldn't be nothing specific that I could remember. I mean, it would have been a significance, I suppose I would have remembered it. I mean, if there's things that you've heard, maybe you could, maybe I could recall them. If from other things that you've heard, I might recall.
Well, do you remember anything about the Labor Day strike, or the riots on Labor Day that kind of kicked things off?
Was there a riot then?
Well, that's how it's referred to. That's how it's been referred to.
There was some pretty good things going on. I think they were bringing other people here from other parts of the country to participate, I believe.
The company was?
No, the unions.
The unions?
I think they had unions. A lot of the Quad Cities, they come up here. I mean, it was almost like it was a battle in a sense, but I don't remember in particular things with violence, except there was rifle shots that was fired to that guy's house. And like I said, there was a lot of police surveillance at that company and the gate. In fact, I can't even remember how long the strike lasted anymore. It was quite lengthy, I think. I don't know, it went to court or what it did. I can't remember. See, I worked up in Savannah. It was about 33 miles away, but I mean, I could have been working down there. You never know. I just guess I was lucky I wasn't. But I think most of the people moved out and found other jobs, and they had a program, I think, like I said, to retrain the workers for other jobs. I guess that was part of their thing of this settlement or whatever. But I mean, those people made pretty good money. There's good paying jobs. And like I say, you see, there's more cars to be sold, more houses. It's difficult. Like I say, usually everybody that had good paying jobs, they either worked at Clinton Corn Processing or the DuPont factory. They paid the best wages in town. In fact, when both those factories came here, some of the sawmill interests that were still in town actually fought them coming in here because they knew, I suppose, they're just old money who they like to control things. But that's stories that was always circulating around. People make them up or imagine them or whatever. There's always some basis, I guess, for it. So, am I answering your questions? You learning anything?
What do you think of the media coverage of the strike?
Well, like I said, there was never seemed to be too much sympathy for the workers, And they had these stories about the thing about the light bulbs and all that stuff. They were demonized, they demonized them, and so to speak. Maybe that's a harsh word to use, but they just. I guess that's the term they use now. But they just weren't. They didn't have a lot of sympathy from the paper, I don't believe. At least from the articles I read. Now, there was a lot of letters to the editor running to that effect too.
So there was not a neutral side. There was always a biased side from.
Well, it seemed like it was biased. I mean, yeah, you could say it was slanted toward the other way, the company. And there was, the rumors about they are glad they have a job and they're asking for too much money and all that kind of stuff. That goes with it. Always is a factor in that. So.
Bob, you brought some stuff. What do you have down there? What's the
Oh,
folders
that's
you
that
brought?
stuff on that. See, pollution's always been a big thing in Clinton, and it's probably started down there. In fact, we've had 4 Superfund sites here. But, I mean, this is a whole book on stuff. It's, particularly one I was involved in. There used to be a place called the Allied Structural Steel Company. It was down by the riverfront. And, the building went, they went bankrupt. They closed the place down in 1985. And the city wanted to buy the building. They had all kinds of plans because it was on the riverfront and everything, and they thought they could buy it and tear it down, make a civic center there. Well, a friend of mine was running for mayor at that time. He was a college professor up in Los Angeles College, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I said, well, I don't think they'd want to dig up that soil down there because it was a manufactured gas plant that used to be there, and I remembered some of the stuff that was buried under there, and he left town, and then he wrote a letter. I got a letter. He wrote a letter to the editor about it, that he didn't think the city should buy that and tear it down, and it never got printed. The letter never got printed. So then he wrote a letter to the DNR about it, and he mentioned that I told him about it, and then he wrote different letters. Well, the whole thing came down to, I don't know, it's a whole story there, a big investigation, and a lot of, that's another story in itself. But I'd have to show you the stuff here, but it eventually got cleaned up and the city never bought it, but there was always the denial that the pollution was there. Were you down at Davenport in 1989 when the French and Heck Company got torn down at Class 8? It was the same type of pollution there, and it was bad too. I mean, it ended up being one of the dirtiest sites that they'd seen. They took out 120 tons of material, coal tar and stuff like that, red lead. So I was involved in that.
Are you from the Clinton area then?
Well, I've lived all my life. I'm
Lived your
fifth
life.
generation Clintonian. And I've always taken an intense interest in this community, and I always like to do what I think is best for the present and future generations. But see, if some people say, well, you're negative, but you know, sometimes you gotta address these negative issues, because they'll overcome you if you don't. It's like I say, you try to tell a battery it's negative, and then it's too negative, and then try to get a charge out of it, because it's not negative. It don't work that way.
Do you think that there was a change in a sense of pride or identity in the community? after this
Well,
year?
there's always a lot of people that they, you know, it's so hard. I guess we're like any town. It's hard to get people interested in some, but there is a sense of pride in this community. It's kind of, I don't know, we got a lot of things going, but it's hard to get people interested sometimes in doing good things. I've certainly done things for this community, different things. It's like I say, it's all there. I don't think it's anything. I mean, I could talk about it, but it's a whole nother issue.
Do you think the strike affect your personality?
What's that?
Do you think the strike at that time affected you in a way?
Well, I mean, I was sad to see those people lose their jobs, and other issues that were you know, I mean, I guess the company was polluting, and of course that's always been a problem in this town. People complained about it, but see, it never got anything done about it. But now, I think it finally has. The EPA was fining them because they were putting too much sulfur dioxide and stuff in the air, so they had to build a new power plant, and it came along. So it's certainly a lot cleaner air than we've had a long time. I mean, there was this thing Johnny Carson said, he called us, I think it's in one of those articles, he called us the armpit of Iowa, because it just the odor and stuff. In fact, this friend of mine, I don't know, well, I can show you that stuff. It wouldn't be something it wouldn't be orderly if I didn't talk to you without you know, being recorded. But no, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff. Maybe that pollution came more to light after the people lost their jobs, and then they wanted to but it was there, and that it took a direction. It seemed like the stuff with the pollution came more to light after the strike. That I did notice, the complaints, the odor. When they worked there, they tolerated it, but then they were there, then they had a point of contention. It might have been part of that, but it was there. It was always there.
So,
But it seemed like the safety wasn't there that there used to be as far as people getting hurt. There was a lot of accidents that happened after that, explosions and things.
Can you explain the accidents?
Well, things like a pump, I think a pump blew up one time and killed a guy, and just accidents. A lot of them you didn't hear about them, more than there had been. There was a big explosion there in 1970, but that happened, that was a normal industrial accident, not normal what had happened, but, and there was also explosions there after the plant was non-union. That would happen, I think, irregardless. I hope I'm not confusing all this stuff.
do you think there was a change in the dialogue between the community and the company after the strike and after more people
Well,
lost their jobs?
No, the city always the city was always more than willing to do all they could to keep a factory from closing down. So they naturally would take sympathy with, and a lot of the community a lot of the people on a lot of the council, half of the council at one time was either from Clinton Corn or DuPont. Just because they became councilmen, and there was always that sympathetic ear to the needs of that factory or this factory.
Do you think after people lost their jobs with Clinton Corn, that they were more willing to get involved in these conversations, or?
What's that? You mean with this being a city? Oh yeah, that never changed. I mean, the workers came and they went and they got new workers there, but the thing was, it's income and people working, so they support the factory. That's typical anywhere. Seems like, whether it's a coal mining town down in Virginia or whatever.
You had mentioned after people lost their jobs that it sounded like they were more willing to speak up about the pollution. Were they?
I think they were, because they weren't working there. They weren't probably worried about their job, losing their jobs, because they already lost that. They already been there and done that. That isn't, but I got involved in this stuff just because I've always been worried about the environment, not because of any. In fact, when I worked at one of the other place, I even got in trouble for calling OSHA on one time for some dangerous practices. But it's funny because the plant manager told me later on, he said, you did this a good thing. At the time, nobody likes to make changes that maybe cost a little more to do something a certain way, but if it's safer, you do it that way,
You were a machinist down at which plant at the time?
Well, when I worked at Central Steel, I was a machinist and tool and die maker, and then when I went up to was actually the Rock Island Arsenal, they had a plant up here at Savannah, and I worked up there as a tool and die maker, and then they shut down.
When did they shut down then?
1999. They had a transfer of function. They went to McAllister, Oklahoma, and I was only 55, so I said I didn't want to go down there. I kind of took an early retirement, but I still kept busy doing I do all kinds of little things. I'm involved in masonry work and brickwork and stonework and I got a lot of things I get involved in.
Seems like there's been there's a lot of factory closings throughout this particular area.
Oh yeah,
last,
one time
20
Clinton,
years.
Iowa, we had a place up here in Lyons called the Lyons Lock Shop. There's locks, you can see they say Clinton Lock on them. They made these beautiful glass doorknobs, and we had a couple of millworks here, well-renowned millworks. Clinton was pretty much self-sufficient. We had 3 or 4 foundries. I mean, the sewer grates, manhole covers, street lights made right here. It's been a very interesting town to live in. Our big industry, of course, we had the railroad here and then the lumber mills. In fact, at the demise of the lumber mills around the turn of the century, 1890s, Actually, our population was almost 34, well, including this town, it was about 35,000. But then after the lumber mills closed, it took a dive again. And then, of course, after these other companies came, then after World War II or one and that, then it got back up to snuff again. I think in 1951, I remember this map I got. It's on Clinton. It said legend. It said 81 manufacturing places, not business, just 81 manufacturing places. They made all kinds of stuff here. They had like I say, that Allied Steel, they made bridges, beams, and actually our bridge across the Mississippi River was fabricated there. This South Bridge and the one in Savannah, Sebula, that was built here too at the Clinton Bridge Works. And a lot of these old country bridges you see out in the country, in this county and around, it'll say Clinton Bridge and Ironworks on it. I mean, this was a good town. I mean, it's unbelievable when you really think that some of the stuff that was made here. It's just like any community. It's out in the Quad Cities. They had their foundries, and they just, a lot of communities back then were self-sufficient. They had their own power companies. They made power there, and they made in the case of Clinton, they made their own manufactured gas. A lot of them had their own utility companies. Everybody was kind of a self-sufficient city, so to speak. I remember those days. And like I say, you could go back, you could raise a family, your kids, and then they could find a job, and then they could stay here, and then their kids, it was that type of thing, you know, that's what communities used to be like. In fact, back in the 60s and late 50s, if you get a job, you had one thing. You may not have a union, but you'd have a vacation, and you'd have some kind of a pension and some kind of health care. It just came. It might not have been the best, but it was there. There was no such thing as, you know, temp services and all that stuff. It's a whole different world back then. Some things were better and some things weren't so good, but like I said, I feel like a dinosaur when I think back then.
So what do you think it made a negative change? Like,
What's that?
So what do you think like led to like Clinton not being
I kind of struggled.
I'm sorry. So what do you think led Clinton, like as you said, like, you said that Clinton was a great place back then, but
Yeah,
then like it went down like
Well, it did. I mean, we had all these old mansions. Fifth Avenue South at one time had more millionaires, they say, than any city in the country, because they were all lumber barons and these factories owners. Hell, they even had a fly-swatter company here that the fly-swatters were all over the country, and it just you'd go to other towns, you'd see something that was made in Clinton, Iowa. It was just unique. It's just a lot of manufacturing jobs.
What do you
I
think
think-
happened to him?
Well, you know, they got like the Lions Lock Shop, that got bought out by National Lock in Rockford, and then of course they all went overseas. They're just all gone. It's unbelievable. I think if you look on your lock there, you'll probably see it says Clinton on it, Clinton Lock. These glass doorknobs, all this stuff, it was all made here in Clinton, and like I said, we had a lot of our park down here by City Hall. That when I was young, very little, you couldn't even in the spring you couldn't even see across the park because it was just crisscross in there. It was all full of trees. Then they made it into a parking lot. It was all lined with mansions all around it. You got the Roosevelt administration, that old building they're fixing up now. That was just part of the whole general streetscape in that area. It was just all mansions and brick streets. And then I think in the 50s you saw all that stuff because the money had left in those mansions and they became rental properties. They kind of got run down. It's like in other towns you saw them where they were fixed up, but then there's just a thing there that all of a sudden we're going to improve. We're going to erase the old and we're going to tear it all down, then put up box stores and stuff, and it lost a lot of its cultural identity, I think, in those days. But now some of that seems to be coming back because I think they can see what they can do with some of these. I was glad to see that Roosevelt School down there get fixed up. My grandfather was the first class that graduated there, and there's a history sense of it for me to see that thing stay there and redevelop. And I think they're just now realizing that you can redevelop these old buildings. I mean, the classical architecture never goes out of style. You never get tired of looking at it.